Hi everybody, Mrs. Volger here. So this is your final project. Thank you for those of you that picked up your materials from me on Thursday. It was so lovely seeing you. Here are the materials that you got from me. So you should have gotten some felt, you should have gotten some thread, and you should have gotten some batting, as well as one monster pattern, and there's a book for a later project. So you don't need that for this part of the project, you can just put that to the side. Okay? You don't need to use this monster pattern, you can draw your own. So if you decide to draw your own, you'll need to supply your own piece of paper and a pencil or a marker. The things that you'll need from home are a pair of scissors. If you'd like to use pins to hold your work together, you can, but for this you don't really need it. It's small things, so you should be fine. But if you have them and you want to use them because you sew a lot at home, that's fine. Okay, so first things first, the directions look like this, and they are online on the Google Classroom, so I want you to read through them thoroughly. There is a rubric that you'll need to fill out when you're finished with this project, and then there is an extra credit, which is a written evaluation. You don't have to do this, guys, but if you want to for extra credit, you can. Okay? On the directions, it tells you need to use 3 stitches. And if I saw you in person, I most likely told you about that, but you don't remember. So the 3 stitches I want you to use is the running stitch, the back stitch, and the blanket stitch. So I'm going to quickly show you how to do those stitches in case you forgot. I'm also going to show you how to separate your thread in case you forgot, and how to make a knot and thread your needle in case you forgot. Okay? So let's get started with these stitches. So as you know, you're going to hold both of the paper wheels on this and you're going to pull gently. And this will make sure that you don't get any knots. Okay? I'm just going to pull a small piece out because I'm just demonstrating, but you'll need a bigger piece than this. Okay? This has a bunch of different threads in there, so you need to decide how many you're going to use to sew your monster together. You can use them all, or if you want thinner threads, then you can separate them out one at a time. So what you will do is you are going to separate out one thread and you're going to pinch the rest of the threads, and very gently and very slowly you are going to pull each thread out. Okay? So that's 1. So say you wanted to do 3 pieces of thread. Again, nice and slowly. And then you would put those 2 back together. Okay, so if you just want to use, say, 1 or 2 threads, this is how you would do it. Okay, so now I have 2 threads. Instead of trying to separate them out, they will get knotted. Okay, so that's how you separate your thread. Okay, so threading your needle. So you should have gotten a black and white square from me for some details on your monster. You're going to remove your needle, you're going to find the eyelet hole here, and you're just going to push your thread carefully through the needle and pull it through. That's how you thread a needle. Once you have your needle threaded, you need to tie a knot at the bottom, because if you don't, when you sew your thread through your fabric, it's just going to fall right out, right? So the easiest way is just to make a loop, just like when you're tying your shoes, and you're just going to pull the tail right through that loop, like so. If you're using a lot of thread, you might want to double knot it so that you can be sure that your thread is not going to fall through your fabric. Okay? Now let's quickly learn again how to do the stitches. All right, so let's take a piece of fabric. I'm going to use this piece of white so that you can see it with the black thread. Okay, so the first stitch, the easiest stitch I think, is the running stitch. Now what you're going to do is you have your thread, you have the knot at the bottom, you're going to go to the back of your fabric and you're going to pull your fabric through, and the running stitch is just going to make a straight line. You're just going to go through the front to the back, and then you're going to come back up and you're going to try to equally space these. Again, about a stitch apart, through the front, out the back, flip it over, through the front, and then back in again. That, my friends, is a running stitch. Okay, the next stitch that you all liked was the back stitch. So the back stitch is very similar to the running stitch, okay? So you're going to go again through the back of your fabric, and like the running stitch, you're gonna go a stitch apart, back in, but this time, when you come back, just like the running stitch, instead of going this way, you're gonna go backward. So you're gonna pull it in, you're gonna find the base of that stitch, and you're gonna put it back through. Okay, same thing. Now you're gonna skip again to the next stitch, and instead, boys and girls, of going forward, we're going backward. This is called a back stitch. Now, there is another way to do this stitch. For those of you that have been sewing a while and are a little advanced, if you want, you can go ahead and go, and instead of doing, so we're doing one more stitch, so you're gonna go through that stitch here, but instead of just coming straight through, you're gonna skip to your next stitch. Now you've done one step for 2 stitches. Again, you would go back to the front of that last stitch, and then you're gonna skip to the next stitch. So you're doing the exact same thing, you're just kind of skipping a step. So rather than just going back and taking your needle through, you're just skipping a stitch. But again, you can do it the first way I showed you, that's totally fine, okay? So last stitch is the blanket stitch. So this is the stitch you're gonna use to close up the sides of your monster most likely, okay? The other stitches we just did are gonna be to sew on the features of your monster, okay? So again, we have our thread with our needle. We're gonna start from the inside of our folded fabric. Why are we doing that? So we can hide this ugly knot and tail inside, okay? So the blanket stitch starts, you come through the back, through the front, okay? But instead of pulling this super tight, right before this loop closes, you're gonna go through that loop and then pull it tight. Again, we're gonna space it about a stitch in length. And here's our loop. We're gonna go through our loop and then pull it tight. Again, through the back, through the front, pull it till you see that loop, and we're gonna go through that loop and then pull it tight. Do it again. Through the back, there's our loop, through the loop, and then pull it tight. And you can see we've got this really pretty stitch on the front. It's nice and secure, and our thread follows us the whole way down, which makes a really pretty look, especially if your fabric is a different color than your thread. With all of these stitches, once you're finished, you're gonna always tie them off by making a knot, pulling it super tight, and then cutting off, trimming the excess. Okay, and you can hide these right inside your work, like so. Okay, so now it's time to design our monsters. So if you want to use my pattern, you can. There are also other patterns in Google Classroom. You can print those out if you want to use those. If you want to draw your own, then you just need a piece of blank paper. Each of you got 3 pieces of felt. My advice is to do the same color on the front and the back. So you just want to fold that in half. And if you notice, a piece of regular paper is about the size. So if you draw something on this paper, it's going to fit. You're going to be able to just make that your pattern for your monster, okay? So I drew my own. So the first step is to obviously cut out your monster and then trace it onto your felt fabric. If you have a sticker on your fabric, just pull that off, okay? There's some of them have labels on them. Okay, so we're going to cut this quickly. So so we have our monster cut out. Now what I did was I kept it folded so that I can have two pieces. And the reason why I did that is because I have some features on here that I want to maybe mimic, like his eyes and his teeth. Now these are basic shapes, circles and triangles, so I can really cut them out of my other fabric by just eyeballing them. But if you have something that's more intricate, this is gonna help you because you can go ahead and you can say, you can cut out your eye because you know what size you wanted it to be on your monster. And so now I have the piece that I would cut. Now this has two colors. So I have to remember that I'm gonna wanna probably have this pupil a darker color, maybe like a black pupil, on a white eyeball. So when I'm cutting this out, I can either use a marker or a pen or a pencil to trace onto my felt, or I can just go ahead and I can cut around like this. When you're cutting your items, guys, make sure that you use the edge of your fabric. If I cut this circle out from the center of my fabric, then I'm gonna have a lot less to work with, right? And these can be jagged cuts, and you can clean it up once you don't have the paper in front. So I have this kind of jagged looking shape, but I can trim that up and make it nice and neat the way I want it so that I can sew it onto my other piece. Now that I've cut the white part, if I wanted to go ahead and trace the black part, and I could make this pink, I could make it any of my other colors that I have in my bag, but this will give you the roundabout of what size you want it to be. Now again, I don't need this to cut this little piece out, right? I don't need that, but if you want to, you can. But I'm just going to cut a small piece, corner, and then I'm just going to make a little round shape out of that. That's why I made these monsters and not something else, because they can be as wonky as you want them to be, which I think is more fun and gives you a little bit more freedom. Okay, so there's my eye. That would go on my monster. And again, I wanted some teeth, so I can kind of gauge. I can either trace with my marker through like this, or I can just cut out some basic shapes from these other pieces. And again, I'm cutting from the edge of the fabric so that I'm not wasting a lot of fabric, okay? So here's like one little tooth, and if I want to put smaller teeth on there, I can. Some polka dots, but I think I'm gonna do those maybe in this color. Okay, so here's where if you had pins and you wanted to pin this down, you could pin this to your project and then cut around. But I think it'll be a little bit easier if you trace it. And don't worry about getting marker on this, because you can flip it over and use the other side, right? So if I go ahead and trace this, okay, so now I have my two pieces cut, and I have one of my accessories here. But I think that maybe he needs some polka dots. Okay, so now that I have my monster the way that I want him, at this point, I'm gonna take a picture using my phone so that I remember what everything looks like. Now at this point, if you want to send me your design, or later on, if you're finding that you're struggling a little bit, I had this, so I could send this to my teacher to say, look at all the work I did. Because if I start sewing this, and then I lose track of time, and now school year's over and I never handed anything in, at least I have this that I can send my teacher, okay? So I want you to think of that, all right? So once you have all these things together, if at any time you're gonna pause, you need to just put this maybe in a book to keep it together, or put it in a Ziploc bag, a safe spot with all of your materials together, okay? So this time I'm going to start to sew. I'm not going to sew it together. I'm going to remove the bottom portion because I need to sew all these guys on first before I sew it together, okay? So the next step is going to be to sew everything on. If I want to decorate the back as well, then I would sew all of my designs on the back, and once my 2 pieces are finished, then I'm going to sew them together. Then I'm going to stuff them. Now I can't sew them together fully because where am I going to put my stuffing in? Okay, so make sure once you start sewing it together that you leave a large enough space for you to put in your batting, okay? And if you have small areas, you can use the back of a pencil to push it into the legs and the arms, the smaller parts, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sew this up. Okay, so we have our little guy sewn. So I used the running stitch here, the back stitch on my purple, and the blanket stitch all around. And I've left a nice big opening so that I can fit my batting. So I'm just gonna take a little bit at a time, and I'm gonna shove that in. And you wanna try to fill your little arms. And again, you can use the back of a pencil if you can't reach to kind of get it into the little areas. And then once you have him all stuffed, or her, you're just going to finish sewing it up, and then you're done. And you're finished. Now this part will be a little difficult because you have an opening, so just do the best you can to pinch that close, and then you can kind of shimmy your batting around. But make sure like his little arm is filled before you sew him up. Okay? All right, so we're gonna sew that up and then we'll be finished. Okay, so here is my finished monster. My son is helping me name him, and I think we're gonna name him Chad. So this is Chad.
Okay.
And so the final step for the project then is to do your grading rubric. So finish your grading rubric, submit that in the Google Classroom, and take a picture of your monster. And that's it for this project. Our final project is going to be optional, and it's going to be to write a children's story about your monster. So our monster Chad would have his own book that would go with him. So in here, I would draw his picture and what he's doing, and write some cool, remember when we talked about babysitting and child development, an appropriate story to read to a child that would accompany your monster. So I hope you have fun doing this project. Say bye, Chad.
Bye.
See you soon. Have a great summer, guys.